and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon of the Southern Tier. I'm happy to be here with you today. It is February 28th of 2023. That is a Tuesday, and it's about 5:30 in the evening, and I wanted to talk with you about saving the Earth, about our planet dying over the next 12 years, 20 years. Who knows? We hear a lot about this, depending on which climate activists that you want to listen to, and they have some solutions. Today we want to talk about two of those solutions to give you some frame of reference and to see what we are going to be doing in the near future. Is this good news or is this bad news? We'll discuss it. But first, I do want to mention, if this is the first time that you are seeing our channel, we want to welcome you and thank you for being part of our audience. We want you to know we do long-form political commentary, and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we do a live stream with you. We reach out on all the social media that the internet overlords will allow to hear your voices from anywhere in the world, to call in, to leave us text, to leave us messages, to be involved, because we believe in free speech. We believe in your right to be heard on the issues that are affecting us all. So we hope you'll join us this Sunday and every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about the issues that matter to you. Climate change has been a big issue in the United States, in politics around the world, literally since the 1960s. People may not realize that there have been climate activists that have initially said that there would be a global famine because of the weather, that there would be a global cooling or a planet-wide ice ball in the 1970s and 80s. Then it was global heating and we would burn and the entire climate would heat up until we reached the modern day idea of climate change. So the climate is going to change negatively because of man-made forces. That takes out the fact that the climate has changed continuously on this planet since the birth of this planet. That there have been 27 times where there's been an ice age or a global desert throughout the history of the Earth being in existence. Human beings don't change the climate. The Earth changes the climate. But many activists would like us to believe that we are changing the planet, which is a bit of hubris. But if you believe that, it's a very serious issue. In fact, it's so serious that we heard in 2019, it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She told the world that the world is going to end in 12 years. She was very serious, or at least we thought she was very serious, when she first mentioned this to the public, that the world was ending and we must take action now or else. It's a very interesting statement, especially because shortly after that, every single major news media found that there was no evidence that the world is going to end in 12 years. That wasn't as widely published, even though presidential candidates in 2019 and 2020 repeated her words that this is the most significant issue facing the planet because the planet will end. But as it turns out, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was being sarcastic. She was lying. She got caught and she said, no, it was a joke. You should never take her literally. Something that, of course, is very infrequently mentioned, especially by anyone in the climate activist viewpoint. They don't mention that AOC was being sarcastic, that the world isn't going to end in 12 years, because no one in science, no scientist actually believes that. That she was making a political jab to gain attention and to promote her ideology. And we've heard that the United States is being demonized because we are creating global warming or climate change. They fail to mention to the public that at the same time, the nation leading the world in reducing greenhouse gases is the United States. That we have been doing that since 2015. That we are so far ahead of every other nation in the world that all of Europe and the United Kingdom combined do not reduce as much greenhouse gas in a year as the United States. That we are 6 times more, we have created 6 times more reduction in greenhouse gases in any given year than the next closest nation, which would be the United Kingdom. And they've also failed to mention that the actual problem of greenhouse gases, which they claim is causing man-made climate change, is from China and India. That each of those nations, independently, are creating more greenhouse gases than the United States is able to reduce in any given year. And that the two of them combined are the leading reason why some are saying that greenhouse gases are increasing in the world. And until China and India can be convinced to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, we're going to continue to see this problem. In fact, they also tend to leave out the fact that Africa and many of the nations, the 27 nations in Africa, until they reduce their greenhouse gases, we're going to again see an increase because they are industrializing. And as they modernize and industrialize, as they dig up the rare earth metals and heavy metals needed for solar panels and wind turbines, the supposed solutions to the climate problem, that they're creating more and more greenhouse gases. So our problem is not just China, not just India, but the entire continent of Africa. And so no matter how much the United States reduces its greenhouse gas emissions, no matter how much Europe and the United Kingdom reduce, the net total in the world is going to be an increase because of those regions. That's important because now you have more context than you've probably heard from CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, and the New York Times all combined. That is the reality of the situation that we have right now. The fact is, the United States is not the problem of climate change. It is one of the largest, in fact, it is the leading solution. But that is not enough for climate activists, mostly in the United States, but of course around the world. And so they are trying to find ways to fix this, to get a solution. The most recent solution has been an idea which is called geoengineering, which is meant to block the sun. This is very important. It's very important because it will affect everyone in the globe. It's not just a U.S. idea. It's something that will affect everyone. The current idea, as reported on Politico on the 27th of February, the latest idea being proposed by 60 climatologists is to block the sun, to put various aerosols, to spray chemicals into our atmosphere, and that would reduce the amount of sunlight coming into the earth, which would then reduce the temperature of the earth. This is something that most of the world does not agree with because the ramifications of this are enormous. But it is being proposed. And again, going back to the Politico article, 60 scientists are breaking from their colleagues and calling for research into what they call solar radiation modification. The method involves spraying aerosol particles into the atmosphere that would reflect sunlight away from the Earth, thereby slowing global warming. This is an idea that was first proposed in 1988, and really, it's not a great idea. Now, I want you to be very clear in understanding that there are over 370 signatures from scientists, 370 scientists around the world in 50 countries that do not agree with this and do not want anything like this to happen. They do not want to pull carbon out of the atmosphere. They do not want to block the sun because this is a problem. Because if they are wrong, the impact is going to kill species and humans around the globe. Its impact is almost unimaginable. But this is what we are seeing. Because the common theme is heat waves, fires, floods, and other climate-fueled disasters are growing more common and severe, some scientists and policymakers are exploring last-ditch efforts to cool the planet before rising temperatures trigger catastrophic, irreversible changes to ice sheets, ecosystems, and vulnerable communities. Let's understand this. The call to action by this minority of scientists is because they're saying that there are more heat waves than ever before. I've been alive for 55 years. I don't know a year in my life where there hasn't been a heat wave somewhere in America and absolutely around the world. Heat waves are normal. They happen. Wildfires. I can't imagine, and I don't recall, a year in my life of 55 years where California hasn't had a wildfire to some extent. And when you take into account Governor Newsom's lack of action in the forest, the ability to allow shrub and excess trees to exist, well, that adds to the fuel, literally, of those fires. Floods have always happened across the globe and continue to. They're trying to say that this is getting worse, except it's never not been a factor. They have always existed. And some years are more and some years are less. That is the history of the planet. And if the planet is changing its temperature, which it will do, and has always done, then these things will change. Human beings, let's take away the hubris here. Yeah, we're wonderful. We're the most intelligent species on the planet. Fantastic. We're the most developed on the planet, and we are able to change the planet to make it comfortable for us. Fantastic. But we can't stop the planet from spinning. We can't change the fact that the planet is changing every day, as it has been for millions of years, billions of years, depending on which estimate you want to look at, and we can't stop that. We can't stop an earthquake. We can't stop a typhoon or a flood. These things will happen. But according to the climate scientists and the climate change activists, this is all because of us. And somehow, if we stop all of the energy production that we have, if we stop living the comfortable lives that we have today, well, then we will stop all climate change, except the planet is still spinning and it's still changing. So they are absolutely, factually, empirically incorrect. That being said, let's think about this. They want to take away the sun. They want to kill the sun, essentially, to block sunlight, which provides, sunlight provides the growth of plants. Whether you want to be a vegetarian and eat vegetables or you just want to breathe air, trees and plants need sunlight. They're going to reduce that, which would, you would think, reduce the amount of plants and plant growth and the amount of oxygen going into the air. That seems somewhat counterproductive. Sunlight is responsible for the rain that we have across the world, providing water to many locations, to provide water for our crops to be able to grow and feed ourselves, to just allow us to live our lives. They think it might save the planet from climate change, something that they cannot stop from happening. Do you see the hubris? Do you see the questions here? No wonder 370 scientists around the world have said, don't do this. This is not worth experimenting on. This is not a good idea. We can't even begin to understand the impact. Remember, as advanced as we are, we can't figure out what the weather is going to be tomorrow with high degrees of certainty. We don't understand what's happening and how the world is interconnected. We don't understand it. And yet they want to change the engine of life on this planet. They want to downgrade the engine of life on our planet. And they think that will somehow make life for human beings better. That seems not only arrogant, but stupid. It just doesn't make sense. But that made me wonder and made me think about something else that we should consider. These same climate scientists who initially said there would be a global famine in the 1960s, didn't happen. Who said there would be a global winter, didn't happen. Global heating, didn't happen. These same climate scientists who have been wrong every single prediction they have ever made since the 1960s to 2023, these individuals who have always been wrong in every prediction and in all the data that they have tried to accumulate, we're supposed to accept and move forward with their ideas. And I say that's because of politics. Let me explain what I mean by using the example of ethanol. I think we've all heard about ethanol. Ethanol is an additive to gasoline. It is meant to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases in our air because of cars and machines using gasoline. Okay, and ethanol is 25% less efficient than gasoline by itself. So rather than just using ethanol purely, we mix it with gasoline because it's not effective by itself. Of course, that creates more use of gasoline. You have to fill up your tanks more often to get the same effect of just using pure gasoline. So it's counterproductive. It's actually increasing the amount of greenhouse gases because it increases the amount of gasoline consumption. That being said, let's continue. But we are told this is the answer. This is one of the solutions to make the world cleaner. But there's a few things you're not told about that. These same climate scientists ignore, and the news media has been ignoring, the fact that ethanol is destroying our oceans. It's not a question. It's not an if. It is a fact. In fact, you have to go back, and it's rather difficult to find, but from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, we have seen in 2008, March 10th of 2008, that the increase in ethanol production is killing the Gulf of Mexico. This is an article that we did many, many years ago, and we have referred to it several times. But the news media will not talk about this. It is called the deoxygenation of our oceans. Or they've changed it now to the hypoxia of our oceans. In other words, oxygen is being taken out of the ocean, out H2O. It is being reduced, and therefore plants and animals and algae, everything that is necessary for life in our oceans, which is partially life on our planet, is being killed. It's just that simple. The size of the area that is being killed in our oceans varies from any given day from the size of New Jersey, the state of New Jersey, to the size of the state of Delaware and Rhode Island combined. It is thousands of miles, square miles of ocean that is being killed each and every year. And it is projected, based on the report by the University of Wisconsin-Madison, in reviewing this and looking at this by climate scientists, they have found that this is something that will continue to grow by about 10 to 19% as we increase the amount of ethanol in our oceans. Remember, ethanol was created by climate scientists as an alternative to gasoline. It was meant to improve the climate. It was meant to save us. We didn't know what the impact would be. We didn't understand the consequences of adding ethanol. But we started to learn. And in fact, even the left knows ethanol has been a danger to the planet. Let's go to 2017. There's not a lot of news on this, by the way, folks. I've been searching for it. So we had the report in 2008, and almost universally, there has been no news in the scientific arena as well as in the news media to be able to find out what has been happening. But in 2017, the Sierra Club, hardly a right-leaning organization by any estimate, have come out and stated corn production in the U.S. was at an all-time high in 2016. And along with that, increased the size of the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, one of the largest dead zones in the world. And at that time, the dead zone was about 8,776 square miles, literally the size of New Jersey. That's incredibly high. And scientists have been warning for years that corn ethanol would lead to larger Gulf of Mexico dead zones, which in fact it was happening. Now, how is this coming about? It's because it is a byproduct. In creating ethanol, we increase the amount of nitrogen that goes into the Mississippi River, which goes into the Gulf of Mexico. The byproducts of creating ethanol creates chemicals that kill our oceans. It's just that simple. And it's something that will not stop. In fact, as we are increasing the amount of ethanol, corn-based ethanol, in the United States and around the world especially, we are killing our oceans faster and faster. This is coming from the left. You don't have to believe me. You can say I'm a right-wing whatever, but this is coming from the left, the far left, the activist left. The very same people who want to protect the oceans, the very same people who quote Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying that the world will end in 12 years. But it's not just the Sierra Club. Because most recently, and this is very difficult to find. If you search for news on the Gulf of Mexico, of the deoxygenation, it's a tough word, of our oceans, or the hypoxia, you will find almost nothing referring to ethanol and its connection to that. But in 2022, June 3rd of 2022, on the website Medium, Jonathan Cruz did address this, stating that, again, just as had been predicted since 2008, the amount of oxygen in our oceans is decreasing, and it is directly related to ethanol production. That this is something that we can expect to continue to happen, and that we need to have an alternative. And this is coming from the same far left that are telling us climate change is a problem. To quote the Medium, "We have seen that in 2022, gas prices are skyrocketing due to many issues arising. And what is the country's response to this? To make gasoline with more ethanol, because it will be cheaper. But at what cost? The answer seems to be clear in that this will directly affect the influx of runoff into the Gulf of Mexico, increasing hypoxia, the lack of oxygen in our oceans, the dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico." Quote, "Therefore, in an extreme corn-based ethanol production scenario, the Corn Belt is even more disproportionately responsible for the nitrogen reaching the Gulf of Mexico." End quote. That seems pretty in line with Biden's E15 gas law. Further research is needed on the effect of this demand in ethanol during recent times in order to see how it affects the Gulf of Mexico. It seems that as the demand for cheaper gasoline increases, as Joe Biden is using foreign sources of oil to create gasoline to try and drive down the price, we're using more and more ethanol as a mix, which is less efficient, causing us to use more gasoline, and as a byproduct, we're killing more and more of the ocean. This was clear in 2022. It was clear in 2008, and it continues to be clear. But perhaps you'll say, well, Mike, you're not a scientist, and I'm not. You're not a climatologist. I'm not. And even if you want to discount these credible left-leaning news sites and organizations, perhaps we need to look at something else. Well, what about UNESCO? In 2019, this is from UNESCO talking about the ocean deoxygenation is everyone's problem. The causes, impacts, consequences, and solutions. And in that discussion, as far as I have been able to read and understand, according to Elizabeth Lovine, I believe that's how her name is pronounced. We see that she's the Minister for Environmental and Climate and Deputy Minister of Sweden. And she says, and I quote, "Now imagine sucking the oxygen out of the ocean. We have global evidence of deoxygenation, and it's scary. Over the past 50 years, global dissolved oxygen in the ocean has decreased by approximately 2%, and scientific data indicate that this trend is set to continue. The number of reported sites affected by low oxygen conditions has dramatically increased during the last few decades." Gee, she's saying this in 2019. In 2008, we knew ethanol was the cause, something that had been happening since 2002. Do you notice what she's referring to? Let's continue. "Increased river export of nitrogen and phosphorus has resulted in eutrophication," tough word there, "in coastal areas worldwide." Well, the coast of the Gulf of Mexico is what she's speaking about. She's talking about the Mississippi River. She's talking about nitrogen from ethanol getting into the oceans. Now, the problem with this study, as I understood, does not mention ethanol and does not link ethanol to the deoxygenation because obviously climate scientists want to promote ethanol use because they don't like oil, they don't like gas, they want to see an alternative. But yet, this is the primary cause, or one of the primary causes, of destroying our oceans. So they're trying to walk a tightrope here, trying to not let people realize what the actual problem is. But we know the problem is growing. You see, the 5-year average dead zone size, also called the hypoxic zone, is now 4,270 square miles. This is the average size, which is over 2 times larger than all the targets to shrink it. And these targets to shrink it have been in existence since 1985. Since records began in 1985, the largest hypoxic zone measured was 8,776 square miles in 2017. This is important to understand. Why was it so large in 2017? By the way, just to be clear, this is information coming from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration of the United States Department of Commerce, the NOAA. This was an article that they put out in August 3rd of 2022, talking about how ethanol and other discharges are causing the dead zones in the ocean. Again, they try to avoid what it is, but what they say is excess nutrients stimulate algae growth. Excess nutrients are nitrogen and phosphorus, the exact runoff, the exact byproduct of ethanol. They won't name the ethanol itself, and otherwise they just rename it to nutrients to disguise where is the source coming from. What we know is that excess nutrients, which would be nitrogen and phosphorus, which comes from the byproduct of ethanol, is destroying the oceans. This is true in 2022, according to the NOAA, the United States government itself. And each and every time that we are looking at this, we see the same results. Now, at the moment, we know that the amount of dead zone, of the dead Gulf of Mexico, has reduced because the amount of gasoline, and more importantly, ethanol, has reduced. In 2020, we had the global worldwide shutdown, which reduced use of gasoline. And we have since been in a recession, which has also limited to a certain degree the amount of gasoline, especially with inflation increasing the cost, making it harder for people to use gasoline either in trips or as a fuel, which means ethanol has been reduced in going into the oceans. In fact, that's one of the reasons why we know that the capacity of the United States is currently 21 billion of ethanol a year. And we know, as a further consequence, that there is a glut of ethanol available in the world, have approximately 229 billion gallons available. And we know that this is going to get worse. According to, and this is from S&P Global Commodity Insights, looking, and this is December 19th of 2022, the commodities review of ethanol plants in the U.S. face hard choices. Ethanol is outpacing demand. We know this. So the recession that the United States is in is causing a glut. We have less gasoline use, which means less ethanol use, and therefore the byproduct of that is that the Gulf of Mexico is more safe and secure. There's more life in the Gulf of Mexico because there's less ethanol in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I've gone through all of that to try and make it very simple for you. We know for a fact that all of the climate scientists, the climatologists, the entire activist movement has never been correct. Since the 1960s, they have never made a prediction that has been correct or even close to being correct. We know that since the 1960s, they have consistently changed their outlook, although they have never changed their end fear-mongering, which is that in every single prediction, whether it's famine, freezing, heating, or some other type of change, at every one of their predictions always ends with, and the world will end for human beings. That's always their result. But yet, the means of this end are constantly changing and have never been proven to be correct. Every single theory has been disproven over time, and there is no reason to believe that they finally figured it out. And we can see that in many of the efforts that they have put forth, they are not just ignorant of the reality of the world, such that the United States is the problem when it comes to global warming, but because China and India are the problem. So they're not looking at the reality that the United States is reducing, but India and China are creating more of a problem. Africa is creating more of a problem than the United States can reduce. They don't want to look at that reality. They just want to blame the United States. That makes this political. When you're not looking at the scientific data and addressing it directly, then you're playing politics. And they've been playing politics a long time. Further, their solutions seem to be having consequences that were unforeseen in 2008 that we have now determined are having an absolutely detrimental impact to the rest of the world. It is harming our fish and algae, oxygen in our oceans. It is making life harder on the planet because of their solution to something they claimed was a problem that may or may not actually be a problem or even within human control. And these same people who have completely gotten it wrong with ethanol, who have factually screwed up our oceans, are now the same people who are telling us we have to kill the sun, that we need to block the sun to maybe prevent what they think will be a disaster, to maybe save lives if they're correct, if their estimates are correct, if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is actually correct in the fact that the world is going to end in less than 12 years. Now, their answer to this is, of course, well, just by pointing out the problems, the unintended consequences of their actions that are negative, well, that just means that, well, you're a climate denier and you don't count. You're not a scientist. Let me address that for a moment. I don't need to be a scientist. You don't need to be a scientist. Do you know how to read English? Do you know how to read? Read the data that is available. Read the research that has been done. Read the articles that have directly stated the negative consequences that are happening, not just from the right, just the scientists themselves, and from the left. And you will see that there are negative consequences that are coming. That's not about science denial. I don't think the Sierra Club is considered a science denier. When the far left recognizes the detriment that is being done that same far left is saying, ignore that and just do as we say. The terrifying thought here is that we have seen consistently, not only are climate activists wrong, that they are causing harm, massive harm on a global scale. And now they're attacking our sun. They're attacking the very engine of life for this planet. And they want us to go along with them because they have a feeling, because they have a theory. And they want to implement that theory now because they feel that if you don't, well, the world will end. Even though every prediction of the world ending has never come true, nor has it even been close to true. There are more people fed in the world today than in the 1960s. The planet has not turned into an ice ball. The planet hasn't turned into a dust bowl. The planet is continuing to move forward. Human beings are continuing to be born and live their lives. There are 8 billion people on the planet. We have been increasing the number of human beings. We are feeding those human beings overwhelmingly. Everything they have predicted, every crisis they have put in front of us has never been accurate. But politically, it has never been more advantageous. There has never been more money dedicated to these far-left ideals and these imaginations of death and destruction, of the death of the planet. There has never been more money put to that. There has never been more political effort put into this than exists today for something that has never been proven to be correct, that has never had a solution, that hasn't had an equal or perhaps even worse detriment. I use the example of ethanol as just one of many examples that could be put out there. We can go through the same thing about biomass, about solar, wind, geothermal. We can go through many of the different examples and solutions that are being presented out there and how they have even greater detrimental actions. Solar panels and wind turbines require rare earth metals, which requires digging into the earth, which is causing a negative impact to our environment. Those solar panels and those wind turbines are poisonous. And when they have used up their usefulness, are toxic to the earth and cannot just be recycled. They are useless and have to be put into dumps. They are dangerous to the very land they sit upon. That says nothing about the detriment to the lives of child laborers in many countries, providing them that. We can say the same thing about electric vehicles. Batteries that are absolutely toxic to the earth, that are absolutely flammable at high degrees, and provide toxins into the areas if they ever leak or catch fire. The solutions they are offering us are more problematic than the problem in itself. But there's nothing wrong with having a clean planet. Fantastic, let's have a clean planet. And to do that, let's talk to China and India and the continent of Africa. Without doing that, you will never solve the problem of climate change in the manner that climate activists want to see it done. It's not a U.S. problem. It's not a United Kingdom problem. It's not a European Union problem. It is a China, India, and Africa problem. That is the fact. That is the reality. And without looking at the reality, everything else is just political posturing. It is about advancing a political ideology and promoting certain activists and political positions so that they will be able to better control the lives of everyone else, even as they are negatively impacted. I'm not a scientist. I've tried my best to find the research to present to you so that you can make a decision about it yourself. Do you believe that blocking the sun will be a benefit to humanity? Or do you think the potential negative consequence is more deadly? Do you think that poisoning our oceans, as we have seen ethanol do, is worth the result, what do you think? We look forward to hearing what you have to say. And we thank you for your time in this conversation.